Welcome everybody to the most recent installment of CTIC's Career Lunches. Thank you all for coming. We are delighted to welcome a distinguished group of health and FDA lawyers who are all from the firm of Hogan Lovells. I assure you the fact that that was my old firm has nothing to do with the fact that they're here. It's not nepotism, I promise. It's actually the beautiful thing is they are all distinguished graduates of the University of Pennsylvania. 3 of them from this institution, and 1 person did his graduate work here, although chose to do his law work someplace else, but we're delighted to welcome them all back to campus. Some basic housekeeping announcements before we proceed. We are recording this program for the benefit of students who wanted to come but couldn't attend. So just to be everyone on notice that it will be released through Penn's website, and Hogan is asked to actually use it as well. So it will be publicly disseminated. So I understand if that is a concern, we want to make sure you are aware of that. We will host another career event in March and probably April, although April, every now and then, it sort of depends on availability of their schedules. And I'm told students have other things on their minds in April, so we'll see how that goes. We are co-sponsoring a number of events, including a privacy event on March 25th and a program on health law and anti-racism on March 30th. If you're interested in those things, I encourage you to come to our website and subscribe to our list. We'll provide that information to you. But short of that, I think that you're not here to hear me. I'm perfectly happy to hand this over to the speakers here today. At Michael's suggestion, I have mild introductions set up, but I'm going to leave the introductions to you. Yes?
I just wanted to acknowledge and thank the STEM Club.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Absolutely. The Penn Law STEM Club is co-sponsoring this, for which we're very grateful. That's actually a personal, the fact that the STEM Club now exists is a personal delight for me, just because I actually think that the melding of these fields is the future of legal practice in many, many ways. And the fact that we are attracting larger and larger numbers of STEM students is a strength of the school. And I love the fact that there's an organization that is supporting them because, frankly, STEM students coming from different backgrounds experience the law school in a different way than people from different experiences, from liberal arts degrees. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much for the reminder. Anyway, without further ado, Michael Druck.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to be back in the school. It's 1990 that I graduated. I want to thank CTIC and the STEM organization for having us, and Caroline Olson, Professor Yu, Carlin Miller, and also Professor Lynch, who couldn't be here, but who was a Hogan Lovells associate many years ago. I don't know if any of you have had her. Anyway, I'd like to start by asking all of you, how many of you have a vision for how you're going to practice law? Vision for your practice. Raise your hands if you do. Okay? A few? Okay. You all are now well ahead of where I was in law school. How many of you have an idea that you might do litigation? Raise your hands. You might do litigation. Okay, put your hands down. Corporate. Who has an idea you might do corporate? Okay. Now, who's left? All right. So, we're here to talk about regulatory, and specifically FDA regulatory. The 4 of us all do a very specialized practice. 2 of us pharmaceutical regulatory, 2 of us device regulatory. And that's all we do. We don't litigate. We might help on some corporate deals, but we're not, doing the deals. We are narrowly focused and do nothing but that. When I was in law school, that was unheard of. No one even knew. There were 2 choices, litigation or corporate. That was it. It was 10 years into my career as a partner in a law firm, a litigation partner in a law firm, killing myself, hating what I did. The litigation is good. It's not. It's for.
Some of your best friends are litigators.
Yeah.
Your mileage.
That's right. They helped me out, but it wasn't right for me. And it was 10 years. I was a partner in a law firm before this notion, and I discovered, oh my God, there's another option. So that's what we're here to talk about. And I'd like to. We're going to have time for all of you to share a bit, and I hope you will. But I really would urge you, while you're still in law school, to think broadly and not just follow the tracks that have been well tread, but think about some other options. So, so I was in this law firm. I worked all the way up from summer associate to partner. I had a mortgage, I had kids, and I realized I wasn't happy. And And so I did 2 years of soul searching. And I examined, all the possibilities. I talked to someone who connected me with like a former SEC chairman and someone that headed a litigation firm. I examined all this. After 2 years, FDA regulatory, finally it came to me. And I thought back to when I was a first-year lawyer in my firm. I shared an assistant, those days they called secretaries, an assistant with a young woman who had already, as a first-year lawyer, committed to being an FDA lawyer. At the time, I thought to myself, why would you narrow yourself to such a kind of this narrow space? 10 years later, I thought to myself, how did she have the foresight as a first-year lawyer to know that it was such a brilliant decision? And that's why and so then through connections and other things, I ended up going I took a 60% pay cut. That was quite a discussion with my wife.
You're a very persuasive litigator.
Yes. But I convinced her that was the right thing to do. And I left and I went to the Office of Chief Counsel at FDA, and I stayed there, I was going to stay there, 2-3 years, just enough so I could get some experience. No, I loved it. I stayed there for 7 years. And I had some kids that were going to go to college, and my wife one day said, honey, I said, I wanted to stay there until we spent our last dime. And one day she said, honey, ding, last dime. Gotta go earn some more money. And she said, and so what happened was, it was, fortunately, and I had having been in a law firm, I did have some idea about the experience that would be useful. I immediately I went to Hogan, it was Hogan and Hartson, and I immediately tripled my salary. But much more important than the dollars was the practice. When I was a litigator, even after I was a partner, I was a service partner, and I wasn't controlling my own destiny at all. I was beholden to the senior partners that had the relationships, and I was just like managing, and sort of if they said, we need the brief by tomorrow morning, it's up all night. Or a team of associates up all night. When a key in a law firm, if you want to have more control of your life, to some extent, is to be able to bring business in, to have a specialty. I prided myself on being pretty entrepreneurial, but just being a general litigator, there's thousands of them. I needed a way to distinguish myself, and this provided the way. So I was fortunate. I got a job at Hogan & Hartson, and I started building a practice. I really love the practice that I've been able to build. One of the things that I did was that I created a working group within our firm called the Cell Tissue and Gene Therapy Working Group. And this was back, this was in 2007. A partner said to me, he looked at my business plan, you won't make a penny on that for 10 years. Gene therapy, I don't know if any of you know the history. There was this incident with a young man named Jesse Gelsinger who sadly died, a horrible death in a clinical trial near Penn. And it's shut down gene therapy for 10 years. But I said, well, I've got 10 years to wait. Fast forward 10, 15 years, it's exploded. Gene therapy is one of the cutting edge things right now. And I also have many clients in the human tissue space. And I could talk about it, but I will say that, it gives me an opportunity. By the way, I have no science background, believe it or not. I mean, I learned on the job. I was a government major in college. So you don't have to have a science background. Now, if you have one, that can be helpful. And I'd like to hear from all of you. But let me stop there, because we'll have lots of time at the end. I want to save time. And let each of my colleagues say a little bit about their practice and how they came to Hogan. And then we can talk further. I want to hear from each of you to hear about, now that you're starting to think, I prompted you maybe to think a little bit about framing a career, a practice. You're going to come out with a license. You're going to have a license to practice law. How are you going to do that? How are you going to use it? What do you want to use it for? So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Christine.
Okay. Okay, so hi, I'm Christine Zimmerman. I'm a third-year associate at Hogan in the Philadelphia office. I'm specifically in the FDA devices group, as Mike said. So I guess my background, I was a chemical engineering undergrad. I decided after undergrad that I wanted to do graduate work and was a PhD student in biochemical engineering, and about a year into that decided that it was absolutely not for me. So immediately mastered out, as many grad students do, of their science PhD programs, and then came to law school, and I graduated here in 2019. I was a summer associate in the devices group in the Philadelphia office, so I've only done FDA regulatory work since I was a summer. I didn't know that FDA regulatory work was a thing when I was doing OCI. I kind of just did OCI as we were all to do, figured out it on the way. I knew I wanted to be in Philly, and I knew I wanted to have some kind of work that I could use my science background to do. I pretty much just thought it was only patent work, patent prosecution, or patent litigation. I didn't know anything else until OCI when I met Blake, and he sold the practice to me to be the summer there, and since then I've been at Hogan. I mostly focus on the pre-market side of things, because that's where all the science is that I like to do. So I work on devices that are not as complicated and help get them on the market and work on clinical trials. I work on devices that are very complicated that take a lot of work to get their submissions in. It's a lot of reviewing technical work, it's a lot of writing, technical writing, which I knew I wanted to do after I quit my PhD program. It's a little bit about me. I'm still a junior associate, so I'm happy to answer any questions about what it's like as a junior associate in a pretty specialized practice.
Why don't we go to George next?
Sure.
Yeah, feel free to
Does it work
interrupt
okay
us.
from here? Okay. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody. George O'Brien. I'm a partner in the FDA Pharma and Biotech practice down in our Washington, D.C. office of Hogan Lovells. And I'm the one who has the master's degree in French literature from the University of Pennsylvania.
All right.
Started a PhD program and quickly realized this was not a good career move for me. So stopped and went another direction, became a teacher, an elementary school teacher for like 5 years down in the DC area before going to law school at the University of Maryland, which is in Baltimore, but has a kind of pretty good health law program and certificate and a lot of connections, obviously, with DC, just with the loans and stuff. So I had to say that I did not have a technical background. It's like a mild understatement. But I do spend a lot of time on kind of novel technologies, and I do a lot of things with orphan drugs for rare diseases, pediatric studies, and some kind of the gene therapy or biological product. So it's really sort of fascinating to me. And I kind of honestly had no idea coming out of law school. I knew regulatory existed just from being in DC a little bit and knowing other folks, but my opportunity to try other things was just as a summer at a big, the DC firm had, 500 attorneys at the time or something. So I tried a bunch of different things in the summer, from insurance to food to drug to, corporate transactions to education. And that was my kind of opportunity to find what I liked. And then started as day one as a first-year associate in the group back in 2008, and I've been there ever since. So I'm glad to answer any questions too.
I have a question. I don't know that doesn't have the answer. What is an orphan drug?
Oh, I'm sorry. An orphan drug is a drug intended to treat a rare disease. So in the U.S., that means fewer than 200,000 people affected in a given year. There's additional incentives that Congress has put in place to incentivize the development of those drugs.
Great, thank you.
Great. So I'm actually going to stand up because I'm stuck at a desk all day. So I hear I'm just going to walk around a little bit. My name is Blake Wilson. I am a partner, newly minted at Hogan Lovells. I'm in the FDA regulatory group. I focus on medical devices on the pre-market side, but I actually like to straddle the pharma group and the medical device group at Hogan Lovells. And a little bit about my background. I actually was a psych undergrad. I thought I was going to be a psychologist, and I went and spent a co-op, I was up at Northeastern University, so like Drexel, we have co-ops. I spent 6 months at a psychiatric acute center and realized that it is very, very intensive and probably wasn't the career that I was looking for on a day-to-day basis. But knew I really wanted to work with people. I loved the treatment, focusing on treatment models. I loved focusing on new technology that was coming out. And so I went and started clinical research at Brown University as a research assistant in pharmaceutical trials for phase 2. And while I was there, applied to law school. And I really, at that time, was hoping that I'd be able to do something in the law that would allow me to carry forward with my interest in the sciences. When I got here, I really didn't understand how to do that at all. People that I talked to were like, you can be a patent prosecutor. That's, kind of the background that I received on that. And I didn't have, interest in going into patent work. So I actually ended up starting out in corporate. I was over at Morgan Lewis, and I spent my first year working on contracts, arguing over where commas should go, and whether it was a prepositional phrase and who had what obligation, and knew that it wasn't something that I was interested in. But at the time, I was finishing up a journal article that I had written on the use of foreign clinical trials and the NDA process for pharmaceuticals. And I realized at that point, I was like, this is what I really want to do. Like, that's what I'm passionate about. If I'm going to be working, law firm hours, I got to be doing something that I really care about. And so I, looked around where I could go in Philadelphia, and Hogan Lovells happened to be here in a group called Medical Devices. My background was in pharma. I didn't know what medical devices were exactly. I understood conceptually what a medical device was, but I was like, I didn't really know the regs in that space. But I came in and, really loved the pre-market work that they did, because what our group focuses on, especially in the device side, is that we go and help companies put together the arguments for how they're going to run a clinical trial. We help them do the research to see what is the case of art for the sciences in their area, for an orthopedic implant, for rapid transcranial magnetic stimulation for depression, for other, cartilage implants or cardiovascular devices. And so I ended up focusing on the pre-market side in medical devices, and I focused specifically on clinical trials because I had a background in it, so I had a little bit of a knack for that. And while I was doing that, I realized that there's this sweet spot here that no one really in my practice group happened to know about. We had MDs, we had radiologists, we had people with biomechanical engineering backgrounds, but we didn't have anyone who knew biostatistics. We didn't know anyone who specifically focused on clinical trials. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to school. And so in part-time, I went and got a master's in biostats at Columbia University up in New York, which also happened to be where my fiance was living at the time. So it worked out for a double purpose. You got to leverage. And so, I ended up doing that. I took one class a semester. I ended up going for 5 years, just graduated last year actually. But it was kind of fun that I was literally taking the stuff that I was learning in class and applying it to my work, helping companies understand how to do the statistical analyses, helping them to describe their clinical trial results, to be persuasive with the agency. And most importantly, going through the entire review process with them in advance to get rid of all the pitfalls. What people don't realize, I would say with drug and farm and device application, is that you're on a review clock. So if you have a lot of problems, that you have to work out with the agency, they're going to end up rejecting you because they don't have the time to resolve the issues, and that can be a killer for a company, especially if it's a startup. And so for people like Christine and myself, that's one area that we really focus on, is bringing the science to the law and how FDA is going to regulate this space. What arguments are they going to accept? How are we going to be able to facilitate those discussions with the agency? And so since then, I've actually reached out several times to Mike Druckman, and he has been really phenomenal in saying, how can we build this out on the pharma side? How can we grow this? And so when you find groups of people that are passionate about what they do, and I find that people in the regulatory space, they go in because they really get passionate about the industry. They love just to dig into the details. They love to understand how their clients' products work and to understand what their business needs are to get it out into the market. And so you get to do, I would say, the most cutting edge, the most innovative work, because you're looking at things that aren't even going to hit the market for maybe 5 years from now. And it's, a really exciting place to be in. You get to work on projects where you're like, you get something through and you're like, I did something that's going to save somebody's life, in the future. Or it's going to reduce the chance that they're going to experience an aneurysm. Or we're adding 5 years to their life with this type of technology. And so, it's great to work on like $1 billion corporate merger. It's all, you feel okay at the end of the day. But, there's something else to be said, with some of the other regulatory spaces. And the one other thing that I would say is, Mike was mentioning that, we don't do the litigation stuff. We don't do the corporate work. We do support those areas, though. So in the white-collar space, on government investigations, if it's a medical product that's at issue, they bring in the FDA regulatory experts so that they can understand, was there a problem here? Were we not getting the right counsel from our outside counsel or our in-house people on whether we were marketing this product appropriately? Did we stay within the scope of our clearance or approval from the agency? And helping companies to understand what the risk profile is going forward for that and how they should address that with the government, or on a merger deal. And I actually find this to be a really exciting area. When you're looking at an acquisition, are they actually representing correctly how long it's going to take them to get an approval from the agency, or where their status is in their clinical trials? Like, what is the likelihood that they could potentially be successful? And you really, at that point, are the subject matter expert who holds, all the cards and the understanding to say, no, I've taken this similar product through before, and I know the questions that they're going to ask, and I see holes here, here, and here, and that's going to affect how you should structure this deal and the types of caveats that you need to build into the process. So I think it's a really exciting area. I hope everyone here, you guys all seem to have at least an initial interest in the life sciences space, so I hope you end up pursuing that, because if it's something that you're passionate about, it will make a very happy career for you going forward.
Great. Thanks, Blake.
Does anybody have any questions? Turn it over to you all first, maybe?
No, I'm going to call on you.
I was going to say,
You know that.
we do the Socratic method.
I'm going to start calling. Actually, I do. We want to have plenty of time, and we can talk a lot about some of the specifics, but we want to hear from you. What do you want to know about? But before we do that, let me ask you all a few. At the top row, I saw that you are one of the few that already are thinking regulatory. So tell me a little bit about what you're thinking, and if you don't mind, and where you're thinking, and how you came to discover there is something besides litigation.
Well, after college, I moved back to Philly and was just looking at legal jobs, and really wanted big firm experience, and saw an opening at Hogan Lovells, Philadelphia Medical Device Group. I went into it. I had no STEM background, no experience whatsoever. But yeah, they're a very exciting and convincing bunch.
I know who you are now.
Yeah, so they wrote me in, and it was the best thing I ever fell into. I think it was, like you said, it was like Blake mentioned. It's really cool that you can work in a big firm supporting really exciting new projects, but you're helping a company that wants to cure cancer and not just big banks or oil companies. So,
Making rich people richer?
Right. So, yeah, it was a really great experience, and I think that it's really easy to underestimate how important the people you work with are, and from my experience, I think, having worked with attorneys in some of the other practice groups, I think the reg people really are so excited about what they do, and it also transfers to how they treat the people they work with. And so I think they're if you're going to be in that kind of environment where you're working a lot and putting a lot of hours in, it's really important to work with people that are empathetic and compassionate and excited about what they're doing.
We didn't care to say that. What's your name? Amber, great.
So I have an electrical engineering background. That's what I did my undergrad. And I went into work with power systems and that type of work. But in my earlier education, I did a lot with research and design of healthcare devices. So I was just wondering, just because of, from that perspective, how closely do you get to work with the technology?
Very closely. Yeah, so I mean, you understand the device, and I mostly focus on devices like inside and out, how it works, how it's built. You see all of the engineering diagrams. You have to basically understand it from an engineering perspective, and then how that translates to what types of questions the agency will ask, what kind of risks there are, especially like electrical engineering. FDA sometimes maybe doesn't understand that part as well as they should, and so you have to be the expert on the device and bridge the gap for the client and the agency sometimes so that you can explain it in a way that somebody who doesn't have that kind of background will understand. But then that means you have to understand everything about the device. And it's cool. I mean, you get to work with the company, you get to ask them the questions, all of the engineering questions that maybe other lawyers don't know to ask. So yeah, you understand every device that you work with and inside and out.
So when I first thought about regulatory, I figured it was going to be more behind the desk, no offense to that type of thing. So there's a lot of client and people interaction in y'all's day-to-day life?
Yeah, a lot of client interaction. I will say, like, as a junior associate, that's probably one of the things that I've been most excited about. I'm on client calls, I get to ask questions, because as the junior, you're the one who's the expert on the facts, right? So you understand the device better than you're the closest to it. So you get to talk to clients. I've been on client calls where I can ask, like, I don't understand how your device works. Can you explain it to me? And then there's never like a partner who's like, no, don't do that. Don't ask any questions. You're just here to listen. Like, you're engaged from day one, especially in the regulatory practices.
I want to piggyback on that if I might. You know, I was, having taken such a circuitous path to law school, I was 35 when I got out of law school and had a kid and married, and I didn't kind of want to feel like I was starting out at some bottom of some giant pyramid, which is my vision of litigation in corporate is probably apocryphal and like hyperbolic, right? But whatever that is, I know what my experience was. And so every project from day one was me and a partner, or me and a senior associate and a partner. You know, they're smaller. The downside of that is, way before I was even in grad school, I worked, you know, as a kind of a legal assistant at a law firm. And for 2 years, I had one client matter number. It was like the largest asbestos litigation in California state court history, you know, and it's just like document review over and over and over. We're bouncing around between projects all the time. We don't have these really big matters that are like leveraged in some way. So there's like different finances and challenges when you're a partner or something. But I love that. Same thing. You're in the partner's office, or now Zoom is actually really even better for associates, I think, because I've never done a ton of like going to clients, even, you know, before COVID. And I had clients I talked to on the phone for like 8 years and didn't really know what they looked like. And so Zoom has actually been weirdly more intimate sometimes than sort of classic conference call. But that kind of small, you know, like, you know, less hierarchy or something like that, just a smaller team is like really exciting, you know, and you're not also on like one thing that takes up 4 months of your time. So that was interesting.
I will also just piggyback on that. I think it's really great. I personally feel like on the larger projects that we work on, like, you know, for filing a PMA, which is like the equivalent of filing a new drug application, it's almost like you get seconded to the company during that time. Like, it's a short window, it's very intensive, and you get to know everyone on the team, especially in the device space. It's smaller companies a lot of the time. It's not large, it's not big pharma. And these are people, you know, the projects are their babies, and they like want to talk to you about it. They want to show you how it works. They're really excited. Like, the number of times when we're going to FDA meetings that clients ask us, can I bring my device? I want to show it to the FDA and like explain how it works. It's like, it's really nice. And I would, just say that it's very fun to do that kind of stuff. Like, I've been to Stryker and I've used their robotics machinery to do like a mock knee surgery. because they were just really excited. They wanted to show us how it worked, and so we like took a trip up to New Jersey and went to their on-site location to do that. So you get to do a lot of interesting things that I would say in other in other practice areas you may not get to do. And it's very variable. You're not going to be doing the same thing, like George was just mentioning. Like, my wife is over at Covington. She usually bills to like 1, maybe 2 like matters a day. Like I probably average like 10 like different clients a day that I'm working with, and they're all across different product areas. And it keeps things fresh. It keeps things moving. Keeps you sharp.
So I want to hear from others. So I think,
Go ahead.
Oh.
Keep going.
sorry,
Amber.
Amber.
We'll call on them shortly, don't worry.
Okay.
You mentioned you have a son. I'm getting more to an age where I want to think about having a family one day, not necessarily in the near future, but in the distant. How does your work-life balance work, and do any of you have children and family life?
You're probably the closest. I have adult
So
kids.
they're pointing at me because I have the youngest children probably here.
George.
George, how old are yours?
14 and 11.
Yeah, so I got a 1 and a 3. So
You're in the weeds.
yeah. It's challenging, and a lot of it is just about kind of like marking off time that you devote to family time. Like I have a block in the evening where I used to just work kind of straight through, like after 5 o'clock, and now there's like a window where my nanny goes home, and I take my wife and I take the kids, and like that is specifically family time. Like we don't do work during that time period. And so it's about like, setting boundaries, and honestly, it just makes you more efficient during the day because you're like, oh, if I want to like keep that time, I need to make sure that I take care of, everything that I have to, and, setting client expectations. Like it's funny when you're junior, you feel like you never push back on anything. But as you become like more comfortable with your role, you can start to say like, oh, I'm going to get to that. It'll just be later on in the evening, and you just make people aware in advance, and that makes it a lot easier. I will say I'm currently not getting a lot of sleep, and that's just something you have to get used to. I work late in the evening, and then I have a kid who likes to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's just the way it goes.
Right.
Yeah, so you get. I will say being a lawyer helps a lot. Like my wife and I looked phenomenal after our kids were born because we were used to working late nights, and like because the doctor was like, "Wow, you guys like really are holding it together well," and we were like, "Yeah, we're at law firms. Like this isn't unusual for us."
I think big law has pretty good benefits for this kind of thing, for medical leave, for maternity or paternity leave, or sort of caregiver leave. My son was born when I was a 3L. My wife's a lawyer for the government, and she took some time off and went back part-time. We have all kinds of different flexible schedules. The pandemic in a weird way makes it easier if we're not commuting. So I got to see my kids every day for the last 18 months because they didn't go to school either for a while, which was a lot. But I work 90% time in part because I want to manage my family life a little bit. And so I sort of have a 90% prorated salary on what would be my kind of standard, and I have a 90% sort of target, for hours and things like that. We have folks, men, women, who do all kinds of different, part-time kind of situations like that, working from home. I used to work from home 2 days a week before the pandemic. I'm sure every firm has something similar, you know what I mean? So that's helpful. And I remember asking somebody an on-campus interview, don't remember his name, don't remember what firm it was, and I just said, how do you manage work-life balance? Because I'm about to have a kid. And he said, I don't. He says, when I feel the pendulum swing too far one way, I just push it back the other way. And it's just kind of a constant, find the equilibrium, because some days are easier than others to do it. As you know from what you're doing now, some days are easier to manage your personal life outside of school than others.
But in relative terms, regulatory practices, it's easier than in litigation and transactional practice.
I think that's the perception, for sure. I mean, and that was mine going in. I think there are, there's plenty of late nights and there's plenty of weekends and plenty of missed dinners and all that kind of stuff. I think we don't have the same intensive burst of a deal or a trial or something like that. So I think that's different. It's a little bit, it's not steady, but it's a little less variable in that regard.
Well, the government deadlines, I guess, like response periods for deficiencies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the hardest part, I think, of the job in some ways, is juggling 40 deadlines instead of one giant deadline.
I'll say I'm kind of in the same boat right now. My husband works in big pharma. We're kind of in the same, trying to figure it out. And I will say, at least at Hogan, like, I've had conversations with partners about what it's like, about going part-time. And, I'm not still a few years away, but everyone's really open to talking about it and kind of figuring it out as you go. So it's not just like one day you're like, oh no, like my work is too much and I need to leave, or things like that. Like, I've had conversations now with partners multiple times about what work-life balance will look like when I start a family, since I'm kind of in the same boat. And I don't know, everyone's really open to talking about it, and it's not like something where if it happens, when you start to have a kid, people are like, oh no, we're not going to work with you anymore. Nothing like that. So there are conversations that you can have, years in advance.
I just want to add, in our group, we have one equity senior partner who has 4 kids and is part-time, and not only is, made it to equity, but also is now the head, one of the 3 heads of our whole life science practice. We have another woman partner who's a non-equity partner who also part-time. She has, I think, 3 kids. And there's, like George was saying, there's a range. I mean, I do want to be candid. Honestly, one of the reasons that made me think of something else was, how can I have a practice which is going to be more amenable to a family lifestyle? And going to FDA really was. And I worked hard at FDA, but I never worked weekends and I rarely worked nights. Coming back to private practice, the expectation, I mean, I don't want anyone to be fooled to think that you're not going to work harder in a firm doing regulatory than you would in some other places. But having said that, there are definite advantages to it, and you can make it work. And we all try to work and accommodate each other. I mean, I have one, this happens all the time. I have an associate, outstanding, and she, I just know there's certain hours that she is feeding her family and putting her kids to bed. And I say, when would be good? And she says 9:30. And so we have a call at 9:30 or 10:30. I don't know
if that sounds good or bad.
Well, I know. I mean, but I want to be realistic. I don't really want to fool anybody to think like, it's different, and it's different than litigation, which is what I know. But it's hard, but we make it work. I think we do our best to really make it work. And as now one of the senior partners who's delegating and relying on the associates. I mean, when Christine said, like, the partners are relying on me, that's absolutely true. I have way too many clients to master all the details myself all the time. I have an associate on every project that knows it. And the other day I had 7 minutes before a client call. And she put together, this is the same one that we have the 9:30 call. She put together an outline that I read in 7 minutes and was right on with the client. And they were like, wow, so I just, I wanted to be realistic about how this all works. And not fool anybody. But
is everyone here, how many are like 2 L's or 3 L's compared to 1 L? So is everybody mixed?
Raise your hand if you're a 1L.
1 L, a lot of 1 L's, okay. 2 L's?
2L?
3 L's.
3L.
All right, so some people are sort of all set. The other thing, I went to, private practice thinking I'd be there like 3 years and pay off my loans and then go work at FDA, basically. That's where I was, and my wife was working for the government too, and that's, sort of lifestyle issues. And I just always sort of said, like, do whatever it takes for the next 3 years or 2 years or 4 years to then have choices, right? You can stay, you can go, and most people go. Like, I started, as a summer associate and went all the way through partner, but I'm basically the only partner in the group that did that. Most people lateraled from FDA or came in from FDA as like really senior associates, or lateraled from another firm. And so, but I think I've worked with like 32 associates in 14 years. So most people don't do this, right? So, and they go to FDA, they go to hospital systems, they go to industry. And there's lots of academia. I mean, Holly Lynch was a couple of years ahead of me, and I still have her file on orphan drugs. This is how I got my start, was from Holly Lynch. You know, there's all kinds of different ways to do it too. And you might not know, but there's flexibility, I think, you know, coming out of Big Law. Are people like dying to go to Big Law, or are they trying to think of other things, like trying to go directly to industry? Does anybody have thoughts on that?
Big law? Public interest?
Which topic area are you interested in?
I think I'm going to do criminal work, prosecutions at Harvard.
Okay, that's cool. I was just reading, is it Ketanji Brown Jackson? If she gets nominated, would be the first like public defender on the Supreme Court, which would be interesting. And anybody else like have life sciences like professional experience before law school or thinking about it? Yeah.
I worked in healthcare for a while, specifically health administration and oncology.
And is that something you think you want to meld to the law degree?
Yeah, I do.
And I think, you know, it's one thing that when you say regulatory, like, you sort of have an idea, and in law school you'll see like admin law, or you get environmental, or food, or healthcare. The way I always tell people about it is, if there's a federal agency, like we have a practice group, aviation, energy, you know, healthcare, like so pricing and healthcare management and things like that with Medicare, Medicaid, CMS. Antitrust, I guess, is technically regulatory too. All kinds of different things like that. So.
And global. So we are one of the largest firms in the world, and we have offices in Japan, China, Russia, Philippines, Mexico, all over Europe. And that's a great, I mean, it's fantastic. A lot of our clients are international. And it's great to be able to email a client, a partner or a colleague, and introduce them to a client. And this is way down the road, and you're thinking, but that's an advantage that is really valuable, because to be really successful in a law firm, you bring in business that others do for you, and you get a percentage of the profits off of that work. And having great people to hand that off to, that you don't have to supervise, that you can just be confident. Hein van den Bos on Amsterdam, I can email him. Got a client just the other day. He jumps right in. He knows his stuff. That's really an awesome advantage that Hogan Lovells can actually offer. So others, let's hear from some others. Anyone else that, any patents? Anyone interested in patent law or have any patent law experience?
You back there? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I guess I was a chemistry major, and I guess at my university, I did like research as freshman year, and my research focused on like specifically like, cancer. Like we made like devices that mimic the circulatory system to like look at how like metastasis affects cancer, and then we would like look for like new therapeutic approaches for like cancer drugs. And I guess like from there, like before I graduated, we were like actually like working on like a patent application for my for like our device that we made. And so like that's kind of how I learned about patent law, and like I guess I'm trying to probably head towards like life science space, maybe like pharmaceuticals or devices, and probably towards patents, I think.
Are you a one now?
Yeah.
Maybe FDA regulatory.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Chisholm.
Chisholm?
Yes.
Great.
Just to reiterate, like I think it varies just depending on what firm you go to, for sure. But also, like you know, you were mentioning you summered in the device group. That was not my experience, because I was at the sort of mothership in DC. It's bigger, so I got to try different things. There's a lot of like pharma patent interaction, for sure, on the drug side, especially because like approval, we're on the sort of innovator branded side usually, but a generic drug to get approved has to navigate the patents of the brand companies, and there's a whole litigation system. So I spent a bunch of time working with IP attorneys in-house, externally at like a lot of my clients are really IP counsel. And then they also have like external litigators who may be from Hogan Lovells, may not be. So there's a lot of room, I think, besides, like you say, just like you think, oh, I know patents, but I think that's where the advantage of going to a big place to try different things might be, you know, or other internships or talk to your alums and things like that, you know, it's a great opportunity.
Hey, I was curious, how much work do y'all do, I guess either in the shaping of new regulations or adapting existing, things going on with existing clients to new regulations?
And what's your name?
David.
David. Want to jump in? I can start.
Sure. I would say we spend a significant amount of time doing that, especially obviously with the interpretation of new regulations that come out, with new legislations that come out. Like Cures 2.0 is obviously going to be, something very big for us that, we'll have to navigate as to what are the new initiatives that Congress is saying that the FDA should undertake. Did they pull anything back from FDA's regulatory authority? Did they add anything under the rubric? In the in vitro diagnostic space for laboratory developed tests, there's been an argument going on for the last 40 years about whether FDA actually has the authority to regulate this space or not. There's been legislation kicking around that hopefully one day will resolve the question. But this is something that we are constantly advising clients on and giving them what is the up-to-date report. Within the device space, we actually have a very interesting opportunity because there's a pathway called the Novo Pathway, which is, for medical devices, you have 3 classes, class 1, class 2, class 3, based on risk level. If you're class 2, you usually do what's called a substantial equivalence argument. You just say, I'm the same as something else that's already out on the market. Like, don't worry, I'm safe. If you're a PMA, you do like the full application. But if you're a low to moderate risk device, like a lot of digital health technology, you have this, kind of weird place where there's nothing else out there like you on the market, but you don't really warrant having a full marketing application. So when you go through the De Novo Pathway, we actually help write a new regulation to govern that product area. And what are the special controls that the government should put in place to say anyone who in the future comes onto this space has to conduct this type of testing in the future. You have to be aware of these risk factors. And so that's kind of like a cool experience. Like I worked on the first medical device treatment for ADHD, and now there's a reg out there that describes how that's going to work in the future, and everyone has to follow that model. And it's like, oh, I helped to put together those, rules that are going to be governing the space for, the future to come. So, I think it's a lot of fun. If you like interpretation of regulations and legislation, it's a good space to be in.
I did want to address that there are other parts of our firm that do more than that some people conceptualize as policy work. So we affect policy a lot, but it's more at the really granular and product-specific level, like Blake was suggesting about whole new categories in the de novo space. There are parts of our firm, in the healthcare group, for example, that they really are focused on changing policy. And we have a whole legislative group, too, which, by the way, is another area that you should all think about. It's exciting, really interesting. We have lobbyists and legislative folks who are aimed at actually influencing policy at a higher level. An example is our health group. There's a big issue for payment of gene therapies that will be a cure. One administration, a cure. Anyone have any idea what, I think probably is Zolgensma style still the most expensive? Anyone have a guess what one course of a cure for spinal muscular atrophy, it's this deadly disease in infants, that there is a cure. Novartis has it. Cure. One-time shot. What's that?
For SMA?
Yes. And anyone have any idea what one course, one dose costs? Just take a guess. Yes.
$800,000. Close. Yeah.
It's
$500,000 or $600,000, I think.
Yeah. And some of them.
Per dose. How many doses for the regime?
Good question. Do you know?
I think it's just one injection.
I know the one I can speak to is there's another gene therapy, Spark Therapeutics, one of the few in vitro. It's a retinal disease which prevents a disease which leads to blindness, and it's $400,000 an eye. So 800 grand for a full treatment. You know, that would, I mean, those are rare diseases. So we're, you know, basically the healthcare system could probably handle it. But what about wet AMD, which like lots and lots of seniors have? It could bankrupt our system. And so our health, what's that?
Alzheimer's.
What?
Aduhelm.
Yeah, well, you want to. So, yeah, so right, Aduhelm, which is the Biogen drug, which treats, is a lot of controversy out of it, but it has to do with Alzheimer's. So, but our health group has worked on policies, proposals to CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid, to address that very issue. And how do you start working on that? So we're more at the granular level. Other parts of our firm do more. If you want to be like a policy person, then you probably would, you know, think about another group, but you'd want to consider both aspects of it.
Yeah, but I think there's one thing that I found, I had no idea about this, but maybe this is part of like the French literature PhD student in me, but, and I know lots of lawyers who think the entire opposite. Like I had a friend whose dad was a litigator, and what he loved about the job was 6 months learning about like auto franchises in San Diego, and then the next was like Minnesota, like something totally different, like healthcare law. And he loved getting in there, learning all about it, and then moving on to the next thing. And his skill was kind of process-oriented. Like, we have one agency for the most part, FDA. We have the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and then we have all the, the statute, we have the regulations, and then all this like guidance from FDA. Like our precedent is not Lexis, Westlaw, case law like you're used to here. It's
right.
It's what did FDA do for that other orphan drug in 2013, you know? And so knowing that stuff, so the sort of like research librarian, like archivist side of me kind of loves that in a weird way. I think that's probably very different from certain corporate practices or litigation or even other regulatory, like people in our own group have a different approach, you know, but so we've written comments, you know, regulations are proposed and then there's comment period. So we've written comments on that, you know, we've done things that made FDA, you know, we've won litigation that said that FDA's regulations were not proper. So they've had to go back and write them. So I feel like I sort of wrote those. And now, like, you know, with all the bills coming around, clients say, can you look at this? Like, how does this going to affect us, you know, or a working group of cell tissue companies, you know, we work on, like, how do we get new FDA guidance on this area? It's kind of interesting.
I know people have to go to class, but if anyone, you can contact Professor Yu and Caroline. If you want to get our contacts, we'd be happy to, us or other colleagues, talk to you more about different aspects that are specific to you all. If you'd like to, you know, hear more and really delve into this question of, you know, should I consider another angle than just the well-worn path? So I'm gonna leave some cards. I don't know.
I was going to say, do you have any cards?
Yeah.
The other thing is they have the invitation with your name.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So please, I echo that, like, ping us, LinkedIn, if you have questions about anything, like, doesn't have to be Hogan, doesn't have to be FDA law, like, just about the process, happy to help, whatever we can do. Put you in touch with someone who's in a different area. We'd all be happy to do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna just leave a stack of cards, so anyone, feel free to just come up and grab one if you like, as you go. Lawyers can't
That's so
help,
old school.
help it. Yeah, I know, I really am. I
They
really
probably
am.
like touch their phones or something.
It's all right.
So I want to thank, on behalf of the CTIC and the STEM Club, for you coming. Your excitement and your passion is...
Thank you.
And we look forward to it. You know, I encourage you all, it's something students don't do enough of, to follow up. They were all you not that long ago, and so they all remember. And
And
so
you can tell that they want to share. You know, they're so excited about what they do.
You made it sound like we haven't matured much.
I'm sorry, George, what did you say?
No, I was just making it.
Okay, sorry.
How do I get in trouble?
Yeah, don't make the same mistakes we made.
Right, no, I'm gonna
I know these tasks are like very beneficial. I wonder what it's like during class now.
Oh, yeah.
Reverend, for sure.
it has
Yeah.
its challenges.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. You guys
Nice
should
to-
get lunch and drink.
Great to be here.